Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Jake Marcinko, as Sharon indicated. I am a senior manager and I chair the Software Security Working Group, PCI Software Security Working Group, as well as the PCI Software Security Task Force. I just want to say, after trying to do this virtually for 3 years now, it's just amazing to be back. There's nothing like having face-to-face conversations with you all and getting to interact with you, hear about your different issues and challenges, and talking through those. That really actually helps us to see things in a different light so that we can go back and figure out new ways to help with those challenges. But I'm just curious here, since talking about I'm sure we're sick of hearing about the pandemic, but I'm curious, did anyone spend as much time watching TV during the pandemic as I did? I watched more TV during the pandemic than I probably did in the 40 years prior to the pandemic. I watched everything. I think at one point I had 12 subscriptions to various streaming services. And so I watched everything. I watched rom-coms, sitcoms, comedies, and you name it, I probably watched it. And I was also, as a kid, I was a huge fan of Star Wars. And so, of course, I had to go through the entire Star Wars, all of the movies and the shows. I watched all 9 Skywalker movies. I watched Rogue One. I watched Solo. I watched all of the TV shows. I watched Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. I watched Han or Solo. And so it's, in watching that, obviously the tagline, making the jump to light speed, is pretty prevalent, at least in the Skywalker series. And I thought that really was a great way to explain where we are with the software security framework. It's been 3 years, or actually almost 4 years since we launched it. And again, we're really at the point where we're about to jump to that next phase. But today, I wanted to keep things light. And of course, as a huge childhood fan of Star Wars, I wanted to invite my hero as a kid to join us for today's discussion. So joining us from a galaxy far, far away is Han Solo, former general of the Rebel Alliance and captain of the Millennium Falcon. Welcome, Captain.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, Captain, we appreciate you joining us today. There are no doubt a lot of Star Wars fans in the audience today, but I'm sure there's probably 1 or 2 Star Trek fans as well. So for all of the Trekkies in the audience, would you mind telling us a little bit about the Millennium Falcon and how you came to be its captain?
You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon?
Well, Captain, I certainly have, but again, for the Trekkies in the audience, they perhaps haven't.
It's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
Well, Captain, not to be confrontational, but are you sure it wasn't something more like 14 parsecs?
12!
14.
Well, again, incidentally, Captain, I'm not trying to be confrontational here, but I just would like to point out, isn't a parsec a unit of distance, not a measurement of time?
It's your imagination, kid. Come on, let's keep a little optimism.
All right, Captain. Well, we're, of course, thrilled to have you here today to discuss the continued evolution of the PCI Software Security Framework.
You want my help? You're getting it.
So, for our discussion today, we're going to talk about 3 or 4 main points here. We're going to talk a little bit about why the Software Security Framework was created, how it was structured, and I'm going to provide a brief update on some of the changes that we're making that we're expecting to publish before the end of the year. And then we'll finish up with a discussion around what our future plans for the development of the Software Security Framework are. So those that are unfamiliar with the Software Security Framework, it is a set of standards and validation programs for software developers, vendors, and service providers to ensure that payment software is designed and developed to protect payment data and to withstand attacks. Now, we launched the Software Security Framework in 2019 as an intended replacement for PADSS. PADSS has run its course, and the industry really needed a new approach that could not only support existing use cases like deploying payment software in a PCI DSS environment, but it also needed to be able to support new use cases and support current and future payment technologies and architectures while still being able to address new and evolving threats and attacks. So what we ended up with is 2 standards, each with their own set of supporting documentation. That includes program guides, reporting templates, attestation forms, and then both standards share a common glossary and set of assessor qualification requirements. Now, each standard also has 2 separate sets of FAQ documents. We have general FAQ documents, which are really provide high-level information on each of the standards and programs. And then we have a different type of FAQ document that's really new to an assessor-based program called technical FAQs. And technical FAQs provide more detailed information around the expectations for requirement, interpretation, and application. Now, technical FAQs are something that we've used quite a bit in other programs like, or other lab programs like PTS, PEN, PTS POI, and so on and so forth. And it's something that we're starting to use more often in assessor-based programs like the Software Security Framework and point-to-point encryption. So we're starting to leverage technical FAQs a lot more in other program areas besides the traditional PTS. In addition to all of the documents that we have that kind of make up the Software Security Framework, the Software Security Standard is then subdivided into 3 distinct requirement modules. We have the core requirement modules, which defines security requirements for software regardless of the type of software it is, what it does, how it's deployed, the architecture, and so on and so forth. Then we have what's called the account data protection module, which is a separate set of additional requirements which is focused specifically on payment applications that store, process, or transmit clear text, PAN, and SAT. Now, the reason why we have separate modules for this is that the Software Security Framework, in addition to supporting the traditional PADSS types of applications, again, store, process, or transmit, clear text, PAN, or SAT, the Software Security Framework is intended to support a broader array of applications, which could include applications that don't necessarily store, process, or transmit clear text, PAN, or SAT. They could be using a token, they could be doing something like loyalties, and so on and so forth. The third module that we have is called the terminal software module, and this is specifically for software that's deployed on PTS or PCI-approved PTS POI devices. There are requirements within the PTS program about how software is expected to interact with the firmware and the hardware, the functionality that's provided by those devices, and the terminal software module defines additional requirements for how that software is supposed to work with those devices. And then, as I mentioned before, by the end of this year, we will introduce a 4th requirement module when we publish the version 1.2 of the Secure Software Standard. That's called the Web Software Module. And the Web Software Module defines requirements specifically for payment software that uses internet technologies and protocols as part of their operation. Now, some of the types of applications, when we talk about web software, what do we mean by that? Well, some of the applications might be browser-based payment applications. Web APIs are another form of software that's in scope for the web software module. And then there's other functionality like embedded code, embedded shopping cart functionality, for example. And then we have something else like administrative interfaces. A lot of the old point-of-sale systems, even though they would be PC-based, they would have a web-based administrative interface that might be used. The web software module would also apply to that type of software as well. And why did we create this? Well, web software presents a whole set of unique challenges that other traditional payment software doesn't. If we take web APIs, for example, web APIs are a great way to extend functionality to a much broader array of use cases and other applications. But for all of its benefits of web APIs, there are some real challenges. For each and every endpoint that an API exposes, that's a potential attack vector. And then when you look at just the proliferation of APIs today, there are millions of new attack vectors that didn't really exist prior to the explosion of API usage. And so, again, the reason for the web software module is to really create requirements that for monitoring all of the APIs that, if you're not monitoring these APIs, if you're not aware of them, if you're not securing them, it's going to really increase the attack profile of your application. And so that's what the web software module is intended to address.
I used to wonder about that myself. Thought it was a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Crazy thing is, it's true.
So the web software module includes 4 what we call control objectives. The first one is really intended around, or really focused on requirements for knowing what components you're embedding into your web software. And when I say components, that could be an API, it could be third-party code that's embedded in there. It's also commonly known as a software bill of materials. So that's the first place that we've introduced the software bill of materials requirements within the web software module. And I'll come back to the software bill of materials requirements in a second. The second control objective is web software access controls. And so these are a set of requirements that are really focused on what type of access restrictions you need to have on web software, on your API endpoints, on any resources that you're exposing, etc. Then we have control objective 3, which talks about other web attack mitigations that we expect software to be able to, or that have implemented. Some of these things are like injection types of attacks. There are certain protections that these requirements that they include requirements for how software should address those types of attacks. And then finally, the fourth control objective is web software communication requirements. What web software vendors and software itself should do to protect communications in between components. So going back to the software bill of materials requirement, for example, a lot of the new control objectives in the web software model, they really build on concepts that already exist within the core module. And one that, but there's one in the software bill of materials requirement or control objective, for example. It's only introduced in the web software module, so it's only a requirement for software applications and vendors that are expected to meet the module requirements. And so, however, the software bill of materials requirement, for example, it has much broader applicability than web software. And so the reason why it exists only in the web software module, even though it has broader applicability, really has to do with the way that we've developed the standards over the last 9 years. We've really tried to minimize the impact of any new requirements that we've added to organizations and vendors who have already undergone or were currently undergoing validation. So we didn't want to change something within core, for example, that would potentially impact everyone who was undergoing validation. So we've kind of added modules in isolation of each other. And this is the case with the SBOM requirement. It's something that we're introducing in the web software module at this next release. But in a future major update, such as version 2, which I'll mention in a second, we expect those requirements that have broader applicability to move into core. So for now, it's only going to be applicable to web software module, but in a future update, we would expect that all software would meet the software bill of materials requirements, for example.
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things.
So the Software Security Framework version 1.2 and the web software module are expected to be published imminently. It's probably looking like November, when that finally gets published. And this will be the final stage of our PADSS replacement strategy. As many of you probably know, PADSS will be retired at the end of this month. And at that point, oh, I keep hitting the wrong button. And at that point, all currently listed PADSS applications will be moved to the valid for pre-existing or approved for pre-existing deployments only. So as far as PCI SSC is concerned, all of those applications, their validations are expired. We no longer consider them validated. However, each of the brands has their own compliance programs and requirements. So I encourage all of you who have questions about whether or not you can continue to use PADSS validated applications in both existing as well as potentially new deployments, please reach out to your brands and or your acquirers to learn what sort of allowances they may have. As far as next steps, we are already planning for SSF version 2, which we expect the actual development of that to begin in Q1 2023.
Good, I hate long waits.
SSF version 2 is expected to include updates to both the secure software standard and the secure software lifecycle standard in order to reorganize security requirements and clean things up a little bit, because we know there's some things that have gotten disjointed over the release cycles for the last 3 years, but also to standardize on things like use of language and terminology. We also want to improve alignment to other recognized standards and bodies, such as the NIST, as well as the BSA, ISO, etc. And then finally, we want to add some new requirements to address new threats and use cases, implement requirements, particularly around software supply chain security.
I like the sound of that.
So for more information on the software security framework, please, I would encourage you to subscribe to our blogs on the PCI SSC website. We're expecting to publish a lot of content over the next 6 months, including a new version of the standard. And with that ends my session today. Han, do you have any final words that you'd like to say to the audience?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff. Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
Thanks, Han, and I would assume you also mean a good software security tool chain. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Don't strap yourselves in. I'm going to make a jump to light speed.
Thank you.